Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Give me a quick second, let me get oriented and we'll start the presentation. All right, awesome. Thanks for joining everybody. We have a very special and very festive hangout today. We'll be talking about search-friendly mobile sites, but we'll be talking specifically from kind of like a content management system or hosting provider point of view. So it'll be particularly interesting for you guys running that type of service. But if you're not, that's fine too. There's actually a lot of great information that you can get from this presentation. So thanks for listening in. I'm gonna put on my antlers so I can be equally as festive as the holidays. So my name is Eric Kwan. I've been on the Webmaster Relations team for about 2 years now. So we're going to get this presentation started. Just some basic logistics. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section. And we'll save some time at the end to do a little bit of Q&A. Okay, so I hope everybody can see the slides. If you can't, feel free to say in the Q&A that you can't. And then I will try to fix things. And I hope the audio is working as well. Let me double check that very quickly. Okay. All right, thanks. I will get started then. So why are we talking about mobile today? It's because the mobile web. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I think I might be sharing the wrong thing to you guys. Oh, I am. Apologize for that. There we go. You guys were just looking at a screen. Okay, so why are we talking about mobile today? And it's because the mobile web is growing at just like a really fast pace. There's a lot of people going mobile, a lot of websites going mobile. So if you run a CMS or you run a hosting provider, some type of service like that, you'll want to make sure that your users go mobile as well, because they'll start asking for it. And even if they aren't mobile yet, they'll start asking for it. If they're already mobile, they want to be more efficient. They want to create great search-friendly mobile sites. If you want to find out a little bit more about like mobile stats, like for particular countries or how mobile is growing in different regions or how mobile behavior is changing, go to thinkwithgoogle.com. There's a lot of great studies, case studies, information that you can get about mobile and how it's growing. So we'll have 3 main topics today. Number 1 is how do you make a mobile-friendly site? This is just kind of a review, refresher. We've done a couple of Hangouts on this already, but if you're not sure yet, we'll do a little kind of like a refresher on how to make mobile-friendly sites. And then secondly, we'll talk about how you can help your users, if you're a CMS or a hosting provider, go mobile. And then finally, we'll talk about the resources that Google has and how your users can use the tools and resources that Google has in order to help them create mobile-friendly sites. So let's start. There are 3 basic configurations for mobile-friendly sites. There's responsive web design, dynamic serving, and separate mobile sites. Dynamic serving means that you have the same URL, so you go to example.com, but based on your device, it gives you a different set of HTML. So if I was on a desktop and I went to example.com, it would give me the HTML for a desktop version of a site. and if I went to example.com on like a cell phone, a smartphone, then it would give me the HTML for a smartphone version of a site. Separate mobile sites, these are pretty common. So if you go to example.com on a smartphone, it'll redirect you to m.example.com. So it's a different URL as well as different HTML. And finally, there's responsive web design. It's the same HTML, it's the same URL, and it basically reconfigures your a page in order to show users a mobile-friendly version of a page. So it collapses resources and makes fonts readable. It helps with the way that you navigate a page. And this is actually the configuration that we recommend. We support all three configurations, but we recommend responsive web design. And this is because, as you can see in this, this chart, responsive web design makes your life simpler. It's on the same URL, it's on the same HTML. You don't have to worry about redirects. You don't have to worry about anything weird going on with user agent detection. Responsive web design is just like the easiest way you get your site to be mobile. And it's actually really beautiful. It's easy for your users to understand because it's basically the same web page. Configuring a website is hard enough as it is. There's a lot of work that people do every day to make their website even better. So just simplify your life so you don't have to worry about any of these redirects, detecting user agents by using responsive web design. So let's talk a little bit about how Google identifies mobile-friendly sites. If you want to build a mobile-friendly site, you kind of want to know how Google sees mobile-friendly sites. So you can build a site that is mobile-friendly in Google's eyes as well. There's a lot of steps here, a lot of checkboxes, but it's really, really intuitive. Just think about how you would identify a mobile-friendly site. When you go to a site and you see it has, readable font size, the tap targets are clickable, like as in when you click a button or a link, you're not like you don't accidentally click on another link or button. And the primary content is not in Flash because a lot of smartphones nowadays can't render Flash. Then you would think to yourself, yeah, this is a good site. This is a good experience on my smartphone. There's a lot of other things that you can look at that that you want to make sure that you configure on your site. But in general, it's just pretty intuitive. It's nothing that you have to think about too hard. As long as your phone is a great user experience for your users, Google will most likely see it as a mobile-friendly site. One thing that I would like to point out is that the way that a user navigates your web page on a smartphone device is pretty important. In general, you don't want people having to move like left to right as well as up to down. You don't want that kind of typewriter-y method of reading content on a page. So you want users to move in one direction, whether that be vertical or horizontal. Like if you're reading an article or something, the user usually wants to move up and down and not like left to right, up and down, side to side, things like that. The caveat here is if you have things that have menus, or you have like in the middle, you have some photos that you want your users to scroll through, it's okay to have left to right orientation as well as up and down orientation. In general, you just want to make sure that your users, when they use your site, when they use your page and are reading and accessing content, can use it easily. So as you configure a site or your users start configuring a site, make sure that they don't fall into these pitfalls. There's three major things that we're going to touch upon today, and these are pretty common mobile mistakes, mobile misconfigurations. So we just want to make sure that you guys are aware so you can make your users aware of this as well. The first is block content. And by block content, we mean when Google is trying to crawl a mobile version of a site, it can't recognize that the site is mobile, or it can't recognize that there are certain elements on the page that are mobile friendly. This is typically because robots.txt or a related file are blocking Googlebot from crawling, like JavaScript or CSS, just vital files that help Google recognize that a site or page is mobile friendly. What you want to do is you want to use the fetch as Google and render tool in Webmaster Tools, because this allows you to see how Google, the smartphone crawlers, are crawling your site and rendering your site. And that way you'll have a better idea of if Google has any is not able to see certain elements, or if Google is having trouble accessing some of the resources. In general, what we advise is just don't block CSS, JavaScript, and other resource files by default. This can really prevent Googlebot from properly rendering a page and understanding that a page is optimized for mobile. One common mistake that we see with a lot of CMSs actually is sometimes there are default folders. So for example, a default /template folder, and there's also a default robots.txt file. And in that robots.txt file, there's a block on that template folder. And so there can be some critical CSS or JavaScript files in that folder that are automatically blocked that prevent Google from properly rendering a page. So you want to make sure that when you create these default folders and these default robots.txt files, that your users are aware of this and they don't either accidentally put things in the template folder that are critical, or that you don't by default put anything in that folder that is critical. So just make sure your users understand that there are the default folders and what they're supposed to be used for. And if there are any default robots.txt blocking, make sure your users also understand what they're doing and why it's needed. And that way they can make decisions for themselves on where to place files, CSS, and JavaScript. The next thing is just to treat Googlebot as a regular user. Don't try to treat it as a specific user agent. We recently made a change for the user agent Googlebot Mobile to be, for smartphones, it used to be Googlebot Mobile. The user agent for smartphones now is just Googlebot. That way it's easier to understand that you want to treat Googlebot for smartphones the same way as you would treat Googlebot for desktop. The new user agent, though, still has mobile in it. So if you want to specify a specific condition for the smartphone user agent, you can identify it because it'll say mobile in the user agent. The third common mistake that we see is misdirected content. Misdirected content drives me nuts. It's one of the most irritating things when I'm trying to surf a page or a site on my mobile phone. And what we mean by misdirected content is, like, for example, mobile-specific 404s. So some users, some webmasters will create a site and they'll say, I don't have a mobile version of my site. So therefore, instead of giving users on using mobile devices the desktop version, I'm just going to throw them a 404. And this isn't really great because your users, if they ever access a site using a mobile phone, it really it doesn't allow them to access the content, and it really confuses them. So you want to make sure that if you're configuring a site or helping your users configure a site, not to have mobile-specific 404s. Just serve the desktop content on a mobile device. It may not be the best experience, but at least they get some content. Next thing is faulty redirects. And this means if you're in search results and you see several URLs, like nationalworldwide.com/shop, and you click on one, expecting to be brought to the mobile version of nationalworldwide.com/shop, like m.nationalworldwide.com/shop. But instead, the site takes you to the home page, the mobile homepage. Now, this is really confusing for your users because they're looking for a specific URL, and if they're directed to the homepage, they'll have to navigate through all the site in order to find the page that they're looking for. If you use responsive web design, most of these problems are solved for you. This is usually if there's like any type of separate mobile sites, or sometimes with dynamic serving at HTML, that this can happen. So make sure your users, if they're configuring sites, not to fall into this pitfall. This is faulty redirects are really important, and we at Google really want to make sure that people who configure sites don't do this for their mobile sites. So in Webmaster Tools, you can actually see if a mobile version of a site has faulty redirects, and it'll give you examples of where it is, and it'll give you some instructions on how to fix it. So be sure to sign up for Webmaster Tools. Have your users sign up for Webmaster Tools. We'll be talking about Webmaster Tools a lot more because it just has so many great resources if you're trying to build a mobile-friendly site. And the final pitfall that we see, oh, this is actually the third one, is unplayable content. I think this is pretty intuitive. If you have incompatible software that doesn't load on mobile browsers, this is harmful for your users because they won't know what's going on the site. If you have to have some type of incompatible software, we suggest that you add summaries or transcripts. Let your users know, like, if you really need Flash on a page, just add some summaries or transcripts below the Flash content, so that users, even if they can't see the Flash content, have an idea of what's going on the page. All right, so this is the mobile SEO in 2014 checklist. It's just a summary of everything that we talked about. I think this is a really useful checklist for anybody building a mobile-friendly site. So that could be for users, that could be for yourself. Just make sure that you are able to check all these off when you're making a site mobile-friendly. It talks a lot about the pitfalls. It talks about checking your redirects, using modern technologies. Don't use like incompatible software. So just make sure that your users are aware of this checklist, and they can kind of work through this when trying to build a mobile-friendly site. Okay, so how can you help your users go mobile? When we're talking about helping your users go mobile, the first thing that we suggest you think about are these 3 questions, because these 3 questions can help you understand if there is actually if your users are actually not being able to create mobile-friendly sites, or they don't have mobile-friendly sites. And it gives you metrics to measure how effective your helping your users go mobile-friendly is. So the first suggestion we have for helping your users go mobile-friendly is to create robust and intuitive documentation. You don't want your users having to search and dig for information about going mobile-friendly. So that's kind of like why we suggest making quick start guides. On our developers' smartphone sites page, we actually have a couple quick start guides for some CMSs to help those users go mobile-friendly. And so just make sure that your documentation is intuitive, it works, it's robust, it's updated. That way your users don't have to dig through forums or like go through search to find the answers to what they're looking for. The next thing is just to create mobile-friendly fast default themes right out of the box. This is important because if your users don't even have to configure anything to be mobile-friendly, that's even better for them. Right out of the box, they have a mobile-friendly site. That's awesome. You'll have happy users because they won't have to tweak anything. But we do understand that a lot of users want to use their own templates or use their own themes, different themes. They like the look and feel of different things. So you want to make sure that the developers who are creating these themes and templates are also aware that they should be making these themes and templates mobile-friendly. So this is just something to talk with your developers. If you have like a developer summit or people that you talk to, make sure that they're doing, they're also aware that a lot of your users want to go mobile-friendly. And the last thing is just about speed. Help your users find fast mobile templates. As the web becomes faster and as we go to a more mobile-friendly web, we also want to continue having, we also want to take into account speed. You want to make sure that people using smartphones are able to access pages, your users' pages or your pages very quickly. So one thing that I can think of that would be helpful for users is maybe having a rating system where they can sort by page speed or how fast the template is. So that way they can say, okay, I like these features, but this template's a little bit slower. And a lot of my users are on slower networks, 2G, 3G, and they really don't need these extra features. I'm going to try this other template that's a little less feature. It's not as feature rich, but it's a lot faster. And on the flip side, if someone wants more features and they know all their users are on 3G, 4G, faster mobile connections, then they can opt for that faster mobile template. So just help your users make an informed choice. And speed is really important because, as you can see, on a 3G connection, if you want to render a page, mobile page in about 1 second, you have about 600 milliseconds already of overhead. That means there's 400 milliseconds of rendering your page properly, making sure that your page renders as quickly as possible. And this isn't necessarily all the content on the page. It's just like the content that the user wants to see. If you, in this 400 millisecond span, are able to give the users like the content that they want to see, and then afterwards start loading in sidebars, menus, and other information, that's great for the user because they can immediately start looking at the site and they can automatically start looking at the content that they need. All right, so the last thing is just how can Google help your users go mobile? We have a lot of great tools, a lot of great resources, so I just like to share that with you so you can share with your users or you can use them yourself. So if you want to test a site for mobile friendliness, there's a couple things you can do. Number one is a personal device. This isn't a Google specific thing. This is for your friends, like from your friends or from your own smartphone. Just go to the site that you own, or tell your users to go to the site that they own and check it out on different devices. That way they can get a feel of how a user is using the page and how they are, and if there are any issues that they need to fix. The second thing is Chrome emulation. If you don't have access to a smartphone, your users say, I don't have access to specific types of smartphones. In Chrome, if you open up the Chrome Developer Console, and you click that little, on the top left, you see a little mobile button. You click that, you're able to emulate how a page appears for different mobile devices. And so this is really, really helpful because you can test your site on a variety of different mobile devices and make sure that they all render correctly. We already talked a little bit about the Webmaster Tools, Fetch as Google and Render tool, but again, this is really helpful for anybody trying to create a mobile-friendly site because this tool allows you to see how Google is rendering your site. So make sure to, if you haven't done this before, if your users haven't done this before, ask them, tell them, hey, you should check this out, see how Google renders your site. And if there's something broken, if there are issues, then you can go ahead and fix it. If it looks great, then you don't have any problems. And then this, the next tool, PageSpeed Insights, goes back to what we were talking about, speed. Again, creating really fast mobile-friendly sites is very important. So the PageSpeed Insights tool will tell you ways that you can improve your mobile site speed. And it'll give you some advice. So for example, here you see some things that are user experience issues, but you also will get some advice about how to make a faster mobile-friendly site. And then the last tool we launched fairly recently. So if you haven't seen it, this is great. This is actually the perfect tool for creating mobile-friendly sites. It's called Mobile Friendly Test. And you can plug in the URL of your site or one of your user sites. And you can see exactly where, if Google is having issues rendering your mobile-friendly, your page as mobile-friendly, then you can see ways that you can fix it. If your site is already mobile-friendly, it'll tell you that, but it'll also give you some advice on how to make it an even better mobile-friendly page. And then this also links to a lot of new documentation that we have. So if you haven't seen that new documentation, please look over it. It's a great resource for you, your users, anybody making a mobile-friendly site. We also have a lot of resources. So if there's two links that you remember from this presentation, these are the two that you should remember. First off is the developers.google.com/webmaster/smartphone-sites. This is really important because this is where all our new documentation is for building mobile-friendly sites. There's a lot of great information here, so please check it out. Please have your users check it out. And the second is Webmaster Tools. We've talked a lot about Webmaster Tools, and we've already talked about so many of the benefits that Webmaster Tools has, and they're continuing to launch new awesome features for building mobile-friendly sites. So make sure that you're on Webmaster Tools. Make sure that your users are on Webmaster Tools. That way you can get the information that you need. And finally, we have a ton of other resources. Like right now, we're doing a Hangout on Air, and that's going to be on YouTube. And by now, you've probably found the Google Plus or the Twitter channels. We have Webmaster Academy, which is an introduction to building search-friendly sites in general, not just mobile-friendly specifically, just search-friendly sites. We have the product forums where a lot of our top contributors really help out, and they have like a ton of knowledge about how they can help you create mobile-friendly sites. And then we have the Webmaster Help Center, which is a lot of our documentation. And you should follow our Google Webmaster Central blog, because that's where we post alerts if we have new tools, if there are any issues, big things that are coming out. We'll tell you about it in the blog. So there's a new tool for mobile usability, and this is through Webmaster Tools. This was launched a couple months ago, but is a really awesome, neat tool that you should check out and have your users check out. The mobile usability tool tells you if there are pages on your site that are having issues with mobile friendliness. So for example, on this example, you can see the usability error of small font size. So we can click in there and say, okay, I want to see which pages have too small of a font size. So you click in and you see, oh, well, these 8 pages. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, that font size is pretty small. I can't even read it on my screen. I'm like a foot away from it right now. It'll give you some, the Webmaster Tools will give you some advice on how to fix it. But more importantly, it just makes you aware of these issues. If you ever see these warnings, either in the mobile-friendly test or Webmaster Tools, or when people using your site or users are complaining about a site not being, a page not being mobile-friendly, be sure to check it out. Try it out on your own. Anecdotally, there was one time one of my coworkers, he was looking at the mobile-friendly test, and the mobile-friendly test pointed out something with tap targets, meaning the links were like too close to each other on his site, on his mobile site. And he was adamant. He said, no, my site is really mobile-friendly. It's awesome. It's amazing. Let me prove it to you. So he took out his cell phone. He went to a site, and he clicked a link. And the funny thing is he missed the link because the tap targets were too small. So even if you think that your site is really mobile friendly and we're showing you some warnings, check it out. Make sure that it actually is that way, actually is mobile friendly. And in general, that just speaks to how much you can improve your site just by paying attention to any alerts or things that are brought up in Webmaster Tools, or like the mobile friendly test, or even just your users trying to play around with your mobile site. Okay, a summary of what we talked about. First off, help search engines understand your sites are mobile. This goes back to the blocking issue. Don't block the CSS and important resource files on the site. Make sure that you don't default it for your users. That way, search engines will be able to understand that your sites are mobile friendly. Secondly, make it easy for your users to go mobile. That means creating robust, intuitive documentation, letting them know that there are resources out there that can help, including Google's resources. Make sure that they know about the tools that we have, or if you have your own tools, that they're aware that they can use these tools to make their site more mobile friendly, and they have all these resources to go to. And finally, just let us know how we can help. We launched a whole bunch of new tools, documentation, but we want to make sure that these tools and documentation are helpful for you and your users. So if ever you see like issues that you're saying, oh, this documentation is not very good, or it's outdated, or there are issues, feel free to bring it up to us. You can tell us in the forums. We're always in the forums looking for advice and tips about our documentation. At the end of this Hangout, if you have like questions or answers in the Q&A, you can bring up some issues that you've seen, and I can pass it on to the right team, or you can just like leave it in some comments via Twitter or Google+. We're always really trying to make sure that we provide the best documentation and tools for our users, your users, to create mobile-friendly sites. All right, thanks. That's the end of the presentation. There's going to be a copy of this presentation. It's in the short link, so if you want to see it, you can go ahead and navigate to that short link. This is also recorded, so it'll be on the YouTube channel, so you can feel free to listen again if you want. Now I'm going to go to questions and answers. Let's see, I think we have a couple now. Hang tight, let me pull that up. Okay, where can I get this presentation to check it for later? We have that short link, and again, this is going to be on YouTube, so you can just scroll to the end if you just want to see the presentation. You don't want to hear my presentation over again. Does Google Sites include mobile-friendly themes? We have some documentation for CMSs, including Google Sites, on g.co/mobile-friendly. So that's something that you'll want to check out. I think if you click on documentation and then website software, you'll be able to see the link for making a Google site mobile-friendly. Okay. I see a question here. I don't think it's about mobile friendliness. If you have any questions that's not about mobile friendly sites, feel free to join any of our other Hangouts and we can answer those questions. But today we'll just stick with mobile friendly questions and topics. Okay. And it looks like, yes, this video is in English. Hopefully you understood me. If not, we can try to redo it. And then hopefully you got your video issue sorted out. Okay, I think that's what we have. If you have any other questions, feel free, again, in the forums, leave a comment, and we'll try to get back to you. We'll try to answer your questions. We're always, we want to make sure that you guys have the best information to go mobile friendly. All right, thanks for joining. I'm going to sign off. Hope everybody has a great holidays.